got fever, Lubie. Not feeling well. I got fever. I got pennant fever. Unbelievable. Been gargling with Visine all weekend long. If ever I could leave you, how could it be in springtime? We have this debate all the time about when's the best time of the year in the sporting world. I don't know that you could have asked for much more than yesterday. If you were a fan of the so-called winter sports, you had Saturday and Sunday, both each loaded, packed, my friends, with 4 playoff games in each league. NHL with 4 on Saturday, 4 more. They come right back on Sunday. It was wall to wall. NBA, far more popular, likely to draw more eyeballs. Right there with them. 4 on Saturday, 4 more on Sunday, including a game of great importance to the people here in our local area, and that would be the state of Florida. And, of course, right here in South Florida, the Miami Heat going down in a ball of flames to the Boston Celtics. I don't know that anybody thought that this was going to be a really good series, a tight series, especially with the news that Jimmy Butler was going to be out for a couple of weeks at the least. And I would have to think that the next time we see Jimmy Butler actually in uniform and a pair of sneakers on the court would be sometime next year, because that was not pretty, Mike Lubie. I know you wanted to tee one up. And we may as well start with that ball game, although there wasn't really much to talk about. Blowout city in a lot of these games in the NBA. Wasn't the most compelling basketball that we've ever seen. Even a couple of the tight games featured nothing but bricks. My God. Did you hear it? You could hear it over the crowd. Brick! Guy yelling, brick! That Oklahoma City game, and they're an interesting story. Young team, Chet Holmgren, that was controversial, whether you wanted to take him with the number 1 overall pick. I think some people were surprised that Banchero went number 1 overall. Of course, Holmgren gets hurt. He gets one of those micro fractures that it's somewhat questionable. I mean, do you think that Greg Oden might have had a better career had he not incurred that injury before he really got the thing underway? He was a physical mess anyway, right? They drafted him. He had some kind of trouble with his wrist. Then he gets this micro fracture. He's out for a year. Never really amounts to a hell of a lot. That was one of the blundered number 1 picks of all time, you would have to say. But who was the second pick that year? Was it Kevin Durant in the year of Greg Oden, or is that too far back?
No, it was Durant was number 2. Oden was number 1.
Okay. All right. So sometimes it doesn't really work out. And that we say because there'll be rampant speculation all week long. This is when it really ratchets up, Louis. The speculation about the NFL draft. Yes. Which is kind of interesting this year. Is it not? I mean, I can't say that I have tremendous familiarity with all of the players. I couldn't tell you who the big sleeper is going to be, some guy that's going to be taken in the 6th round that's going to turn out to be the next Tom Brady. Not sure that I have that kind of insight into it. Do you think that anybody does? Because if they did, the guy wouldn't go in the 6th round. You'd think one of the 32 scouting staffs might have been able to spot somebody who had this kind of talent. Even if you look at Brock Purdy, right? Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick, overlooked by virtually everybody with every selection. And this is a guy who's about to, at some point in the very near future, probably cop one of the highest contracts that's out there in the league. I don't know how San Francisco can get by without paying this guy once he gets to year number 5. So if they decide that that's what they want to do, and think about that, they found this guy in the scrap heap of the draft after they traded up to get Trey Lance, who turned out to be a complete bust, you would have to say at this stage. Yep. Complete bust. Wasn't able to retain the starting position. He was even considered to be 2nd string behind, or actually 3rd string behind Sam Darnold, who was another guy that people took a quantum leap of faith on in the draft and turned out to not really be much. I mean, do you really want to spend your number 1 pick on a perennial career backup? One of those guys that years after his career is over, you go, can you believe that? Darnold was in the league for like 12 years. Fucking Darko Milicic. Unbelievable, right? Darko Milicic was in the league for like 14 years, even though everybody thought it was one of the biggest blunders in the history of NBA drafts. But, what did you see out there? I mean, is it even fair to judge the Miami Heat without Jimmy Butler in the lineup? Now, the weird thing about it, Lubie, if you look at it statistically, Jimmy Butler missed 22 games this year, and the Heat in those 22 games were 13-9, and they averaged 109 points a game, 109 and change. And in the other 60 games, they went 33-27, 6 games over 500. So there were 4 games over 500 in the 22 games that Butler missed, averaged 109 points a game. And there were 6 games over, which if you do the extrapolation is actually a worse record than the games they played without Jimmy Butler. Not to say that he wasn't a valuable asset and isn't the key ingredient with that team, because if he's not doing anything, it just doesn't seem like they really have that guy that can come forward, take the big step up. It's not Tyler Hero at this stage,
No,
and it's not Bam Adebayo. But they had similar stats. They averaged 110 points a game in the games without Jimmy Butler, while going 6 games over 500 through 60 games.
no.
So I don't know. I mean, what does that say? Does that tell you anything? Is Jimmy Butler really that big of a difference maker when it comes to this Heat lineup, or do they absolutely have to have more guys around him if they're going to be successful?
I mean, it's this time of the year. Jimmy Butler is a straw that stirs the drink, as they say, and you can just see it. They count on a lot of young guys, and the young guys. Look, Hawkes Jr. put up decent numbers. Jovic was okay, but it took them a long time to get settled into the game, and the game was pretty much over by then. Yeah, they made a run. They cut it down. They started at 14-0. They got to within 3 in the second quarter, um, but it fell apart rapidly after that. Their defense is just a step slow, and their offense is labored, and the Celtics took advantage of it. The Celtics are very healthy, and the Heat aren't. I mean, that's the other thing, that the Rozier injury is just as big, because down the stretch, Rozier was probably their best offensive player without Jimmy Butler, and they don't have him either. Tyler Hero is just not the guy that he thinks he is and that the Heat think he is. And Bam is a really good defensive player who lacks a lot on offense consistently, especially this time of the year. Look, once Butler went down, to me, the series changed from, oh, that could be a really good series, to when will the Celtics end it? And I think that's where we're at. I can see the Heat taking a game. I've said that. I mean, the guys the Heat have played much better. Caleb Martin, who's disappeared, plays really well at home. I can see Jovic, Hawkes Jr., Tyler Hero waking up at home and them getting a game. But this series is over before it began, and it all is Jimmy Butler. Yeah, the record is pretty good in the regular season without Jimmy Butler. We know the playoffs are a different animal. It just is. And Jimmy Butler does raise his game to a different level in the playoffs. It sucks to see him get hurt. But this is, look, with his age, the way he plays, his whole career, this is the story every year. Every playoff we've said, oh, if he wasn't hurt. Okay, well, he's hurt every playoffs. Like, that's how he plays. He's very.
That was your assertion about Porzingis of the Celtics, that there was no way that he was going to
never.
complete the season without somehow being compromised by the time you get to the postseason. Anyway, the general consensus is that Boston is light years ahead of the rest of the teams in the East.
Yes.
They were during the regular season. Boston was not really heavily impacted by injuries. Porzingis, I guess this was load management, game
Yes.
management. Sat out about 20 games during the course of the regular season. I don't remember him having any major injury issues during any part of the regular season, but certainly was a huge asset to the Boston Celtics when they were in there, and it probably was the key ingredient to changing them from being competitive and maybe slightly better than the rest of the teams in the East to just being vastly superior. So we shall see. The Knicks game was pretty exciting against the Philadelphia 76ers. That wasn't a bad ball game. Came down to the final minutes, and then Josh Hart got red hot, hit a couple of threes, which was somewhat uncharacteristic. The guy hadn't been shooting the ball all that well in the contest. They're in Madison Square Garden. That was very exciting. Joel Embiid, what was on his game, and that one looks like it's going to be hotly contested. That series, Anunoby, the guy that you said didn't really make that much of a difference. You didn't think that was that big of a deal. That this guy's a huge asset to the New York Knicks, and of course they're doing it without Julius Randle. So you would think the Knicks' chances of winning the championship probably went out the window, zippity doo dah, without having a big man in there. But nonetheless, they were able to grit one out against the Philadelphia 76ers. That was a pretty exciting game. Most of the games, the OKC New Orleans game, surprisingly, without Zion Williamson in there, turned out to be a thriller in Manila. As it came down to the final second, C.J. McCollum had a chance to tie the ball game and or win it with a shot attempt. They had 14 seconds to go, and New Orleans gets the ball. They kind of blundered away and just drifted away with about 4 seconds left. They started to make a move for the basket. The ball was fumbled. McCollum had to take an awkward shot, misses. And OKC, which is kind of a Cinderella team this year, number 1 seed in the West, very surprising. That one is hard to get a grip on, isn't it? That the Oklahoma City Thunder ended up as the number 1 seed in what was a highly competitive and very, very evenly matched Western Conference this year. You can make a case for almost anybody there, but of course, the Denver Nuggets, who knocked off the Lakers for the 9th consecutive time, you would have to think are the cream that will eventually rise to the top. Clippers winners without Kawhi Leonard in there, Lubie. That was kind of
crazy.
interesting.
They were dominant. They won. They were dominant without Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas Mavericks, which they were the hottest team at the end of the regular season, or if not the hottest, certainly among the hottest. I think they won something like 12 of their last 14 games, or something along those lines. It might have even been better than that. And they were hard pressed in this ball game against the LA Clippers to come up with anything. It was kind of interesting to see the contrast, the looks on the faces of the two owners. You know that Steve Ballmer, the guy that paid like $2.4 million, I think he even paid like a hush money payment to V. Stiviano for her not to reveal that she was the guy that got Donald Sterling thrown out of basketball, of course, with that phone call. Yeah, it was me. And then they got Sterling on there and using the N-word and saying he doesn't want these people sitting in the front row because it's an embarrassment. This was a guy who had made a fortune off low-rent housing and the so-called slumlord. Embarrassing for the league. They quickly and decisively came in there. That was when everybody thought Adam Silver was really on top of his game, yes. Remember?
Yes.
He did something that anybody was going to do. And that is, as soon as they started covering up the Ford sign and the Budweiser sign in the arena there, because the companies were a little uncomfortable with this racist approach of the owner, all of a sudden, Adam Silver, let's go, let's get him. So they got Steve Ballmer in there. What do you pay? Like $2.4 billion for a team that you thought was worthless? The LA Clippers. I didn't even know they had fans. Did you see that? They packed the arena. The Clippers now have fans. They're kind of like the Chargers are in Los Angeles, where you listen to the games and you're wondering, oh, geez, who just scored? And everybody's rooting for Green Bay or whatever other team happens to be at the stadium that day. But the Clippers are kind of a sleeper team a little bit. They're always the wise guy choice to win it all, but I don't know if they can. What's the story with Kawhi Leonard? How serious is that injury? Do we know?
I don't know. That's what was weird is out of nowhere, the Clippers had built a lot of steam, and I didn't realize Westbrook was also on their team. They actually have a lot of talent, and Harden is playing as well as he's played and as unselfishly and quiet as he's played in a long time. And George looks healthy. They were a team that people were like, oh, they could actually. Because unlike the Thunder and the T-Wolves, who are young teams who have a lot of talent, the Clippers are actually veteran-laden. And this is like maybe one of their last rides. So people are like, oh, shoot, they can maybe take out the Nuggets or give them a lot of trouble. And then, Kawhi's out, well, of course. And then they were dominant. I don't know. I haven't heard anything like he's out for the long haul. Maybe they were like, look, we may lose this game. Let's just let him get a little extra rest. Now they have a game in their bag. It'll be curious to see if Harden can keep playing like this, because that's the problem with him is throughout the playoffs in his career, we've seen him ebb and flow. If you can have Harden playing like that, George playing like that, Kawhi rested, the Nuggets don't have wings like that. That's the one thing the Nuggets don't have. Gordon can play on the wing and Porter Jr. can play on the wing, but they don't have three dudes like that on the wing. Not really anyone in the league has that. I'm curious to see if they can get through without getting injured or without hating each other. Because if they can, then they can be what the T-Wolves and the Thunder probably won't be.
It was funny. I mean, they kept showing Ballmer, and you know how overly enthusiastic he is. You're thinking, this maniac somehow made hundreds of billions of dollars? You got to be kidding me. He looks like a guy that should be putting a jacket that ties in the back, which, I can't really discourage anybody from showing that kind of enthusiasm, but it is a little over the top. Would you say, Lubie? Steve Ballmer's reaction. Guy makes a free throw. It's 1-0. Yeah, he's going crazy. You're thinking, really? That's one of the richest guys in the fucking world? Behaving like that, like a maniac. Now we've seen Mark Cuban, of course, the Dallas Mavericks owner, and, he's been vindicated in many of the things that he's thought and said that he was often criticized for. In fact, fans were sort of anti-Mark Cuban, were they not? In the very beginning, everybody thought he was just an asshole and he was carrying on and all of the theatrics he thought were embarrassing. And he was constantly being fined. Now, that's kind of simmered down. But nonetheless, a very astute knowledge of the team. And yet he looked like he had just lost a deal on Shark Tank to Mr. Wonderful. Because he looked like he was going to just walk outside the arena and lay face down in the gutter for a while as Dallas got its ass kicked. Hockey, kind of interesting. The Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning. That's the one in-state professional rivalry that we have here in Florida that actually has some significance. The two teams hate each other. They're likely to come to blows at some time during the course of the playoff series. The Panthers and the Lightning, when they do battle, there is a little bit of excitement added to the equation. And the Panthers, Sam Reinhart, this guy might have had the best season of anybody, and that's saying a lot because we all saw Tyreek Hill and what he was doing with the Miami Dolphins. But if you were looking at what athlete in South Florida for any of the South Florida teams had the best season of anybody, it might be this Sam Reinhart of the Florida Panthers, who scored 50 plus goals this year. I think it might have been, high 50s, like 55 or so. And of course, he got the Panthers off to a good start last night or yesterday afternoon. Florida prevails 3-2. Rangers, you figure, are going to take out the Washington Capitals without too much difficulty. Here's one. Wasn't the Colorado Avalanche? Wasn't that the team that everybody was touting that was going to win it all? Maybe a couple of months ago, everybody said the Avalanche, they might have even been favored to win the Stanley Cup. They're not anymore.
Was them and Vancouver, because they won it 2 years ago and they had a really strong regular season.
Yeah. Colorado loses to Winnipeg 7-6 in extra innings. Unbelievable. 7-6 in a playoff game. And Vancouver came back from the grave. They were down to the Nashville Predators, and they came back and won that game 4-2 yesterday. Big slate of NHL games. And it just keeps getting better, Lubie, because if you're a sports fan, tonight you have 3 games in the NBA and 4 games in the NHL taking place today. Unbelievable. So how can you go wrong? Plus, there was other action. Scotty Scheffler is about to close out another victory in the Heritage Classic. He's got a giant lead with a few holes to play. They suspended play, going to finish it up today. Congratulations to Nelly Korda. Ties a record. And now we don't talk a lot of women's golf here because we couldn't pronounce the names of all of those Koreans, even though they only involve 2 letters, right? How can you get that wrong? Right? It's like Kim Ng, who was the general manager last year, did a fine job with the Miami Marlins, only to get fired to be replaced by some bozo from the Tampa Bay Rays organization, who everybody cherishes the idea, well, we're going to get one of these Rays numerical guys, and the next thing you know, you're 12 games under 500 at the very start of the season, even with a couple of victories over the weekend at Wrigley Field. But the women's tour was dominated forever by Korean players, was it not, Lubie? You couldn't recognize anybody. And now this Nelly Korda has won 5 straight starts, which puts her in some pretty illustrious company. She's won 5 straight tournaments. This was a major. It was the Chevron Classic or whatever. And she wins it by a couple of strokes. I might have just prevailed by 1. But nonetheless, 5 straight starts. Puts her in the same company as Annika No, not Annika Sorenstam, but and Annika Sorenstam and Nancy Lopez, I believe, the only 2 other women to win 5 consecutive starts. So congratulations there. And a lot of hullabaloo on social media about this fight, Lubie. I know you're not a big boxing guy anymore, but
I've seen people
Ryan Garcia.
I'm actually annoyed. I'm like, fuck, I would have watched Haney. I'm like, other people talking about this fight. I'm like, shit, I would have watched it. I know there was a fight of that caliber, of that level. Suppose it was a good fight, and the ref sucked ass.
Oh, my God. I mean, an embarrassment. Just watching back, the good thing about the fight game now, you can't find fights on regular over-the-air television anymore, or even cable channels. Boxing given up by Showtime, HBO got out of the game. So the average boxing fan is searching, right? Unless you subscribe to one of these networks that carries it, like DAZN, DAZN, and then you still have to pay a premium to watch the good fights. So I'm not sure what the advantage is, unless you just like to watch constant boxing. You may as well just go get old tapes of the Gillette Fight of the Week and see some really good stuff. But nonetheless, Ryan Garcia, most people thought that after he got destroyed by Tank Davis, Gervonta Davis, that he was all talk, all hype, and no real substance. And Devin Haney was deemed by many to be pound for pound consideration for the best in the world today. Devin Haney, everybody loved this guy. He was a 5-1 favorite. And Garcia goes in there, knocks him down 3 times, and somehow ends up with a majority decision, which I think everybody was paid off in that fight, and it still went Garcia's way. How much bribery money was thrown out there on that, right? The referee obviously was in Haney's corner. The judges had to be bought and paid for by the people that were backing Devin Haney. And so congratulations, Ryan Garcia. He really vindicated himself. A lot of people thought he was just a loudmouth that was brilliant at social media, and he acted half crazy before this fight. Many people think he's a borderline lunatic. And he went in there and distinguished himself. And now, as Oscar De La Hoya said, might be the face of boxing right now. So congratulations to him on pulling off a 5-1 upset. All right, we have to run. Thanks so much. A lot to talk about here, and certainly the rest of the week. Lubie's mock draft, you can look forward to that. What round are you on now? The fourth round of your mock draft predictions?
Yes, just getting through round 4. Well,
Okay.
hopefully be done with round 7 by Thursday evening.
You're looking at a man that's midway through the fourth round of his mock draft selections.
That's me.
That's quite a distinction. All right, we have to get out of here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate all the people that are eyeballing the show now. We saw some pretty significant numbers there, which was great. I always hope these numbers are for real because it makes you feel good. So thank you very much for the support of the Morning Briefing. From Mike Lubie, I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll see you tomorrow. The next edition of the Morning Briefing here on No Filter.